There are quite a few unwritten rules in our society, one of the most important of which is the right to privacy, in that it doesn't really matter who you are, you can have the right to your own private address with nobody else knowing it as much as reasonably possible, but also that you shouldn't expect to be targeted at your home address. Now, with the advent of social media, the line has started to get a little bit blurred. After all, anyone can download the Bird app and yell whoever you want from wherever you want, and all of that's kind of considered, well, fine, but when it comes to the real world, you really shouldn't be, going to people's addresses or putting people's addresses online. So many people understand that this is bad behaviour, except for everyone's favourite community, the most oppressed community in human history, if you believe what they say. Last Friday, a number of trans activists, well, 3 in particular, or I should probably say queer activists, I'm not sure the exact wording to use here, but Holly Stars, Georgia Frost, and Richard Energy, so that's the people who you can see on the screen in front of you, they decided to turn up to J.K. Rowling's house. Now, J.K. Rowling has become, the prime target for queer activists because Potter woman bad. Naturally, they had the various banners that one would expect to be pushing the same messages: trans liberation now, trans rights are human rights, all the cliches at this point. And notably, this protest was held the day before Trans Day of Remembrance and during Trans Awareness Week. Now, naturally, a lot of people weren't happy with this. They weren't happy that, a couple of people had decided to go to someone's personal address. Doesn't matter if they're J.K. Rowling, doesn't matter if they are a celebrity billionaire, it's still someone's private address. They took a photo showing her house number. That's unacceptable, so they gained flack for it. And the activists acted in an incredibly predictable way. And in fact, this is a pattern that I've recognised a lot of progressive activists follow. So, after they'd been called out for essentially doxing J.K. Rowling and, well, targeting her home, they informed everyone that they had been the victim of transphobic abuse themselves since putting up the pictures. They've received so much abuse, and it's all awful, and, we need to focus on the abuse that they've received. But they also stand by what they did to J.K. Rowling, so they still think it's acceptable to target someone's home. Now, again, it's very important to recognise what's going on here. This is a very clear tactic that these people use. First of all, they do an action or make a comment that goes against what society generally expects is acceptable. They then receive a blowback from society at large, saying that, no, your behaviour is unacceptable. Following this comes the deflection, so you don't really want to take all that much responsibility for what you did because you actually agree with what you did. That comes a little bit later. Right now we need to deflect and focus on the bad thing which is happening to you. In this instance, it's transphobic abuse that we're receiving. And then finally, just in the small print, put, by the way, we stand by what we did. We think that's perfectly fine and dandy and cool because, Potter woman bad, once again. Remember that. So that's all fine. And this is an incredibly common technique, not just with trans activists, but progressives at large. In fact, if you ever come across anything, whether it's on social media or an opinion piece or a video, which starts off with someone talking about the bad thing which has happened to them, when their real discussion is supposed to be on something happening to their opponent, that is the deflection. I've come across this many a time. You'll receive, whether it's like messages or whatever about bad thing happened to me. Focus on bad thing that happened to me. Don't talk about the bad thing that happened to somebody else, which by the way I actually support, but talk about bad thing that happened to me. This is a really common deflection technique. Recognise it. But that's not the purpose of this video. Nor is the purpose of the video really to discuss why this was a bad action to take from the trans community, or rather, like, what is wrong with doxing and, targeting people's homes. Because this is stuff which should be common sense to everyone. But just to kind of go over a couple of things, a lot of trans activists defending what had happened have tried to claim that this isn't really doxing, and the reason for that is, well, you can find J.K. Rowling's address easily online, and there have been tours that have gone by her house and pointed it out, and I saw one person actually say that there was a bus stop by her house, so therefore that makes her, that means that she has no right to privacy because bus. Okay, but she can still have the right to not have her address put up by people who she doesn't want to. And, you can only control so much of the information once it gets online. I'm sure that J.K. Rowling, like a lot of celebrities, values her privacy and doesn't want to have bus tours coming by her house so people can take photos of her house and point and say, look, that's J.K. Rowling's house, because not many of us would really like that, but there's only so much that she controls here. And I wouldn't say that her address is necessarily common knowledge, but putting it out in a picture which is going to be shared by lots of activists who pretty much are out for blood. I mean, she receives a lot of threats, as she's made very clear. She's, I can see why she wouldn't want it to be out there in this manner. And I don't think that it being J.K. Rowling is enough of a defence against doxing. And again, nor should I really explain why going to someone's private address is such a problem, but apparently I have to, because trans activists have only been focusing on, well, J.K. Rowling's public address, everyone should recognise, it's public knowledge. You still don't go to someone's house and target them. It doesn't matter what message you're pushing. She deserves the right to privacy, as do you. You do not protest at people's houses. You can find a street or a public area and do it. You don't do it outside of someone's house. And this leads on to what the real issue of all of this is. The community seems to be so blindsided by extremism, whether it's in their beliefs or their actions, that they cannot take 1 second to take a step back and wonder, how does this look outside the queer bubble? How are people who don't believe that there are multiple genders seeing what we're doing now? Bear in mind, these are people who claim to be the most oppressed class on earth. And that we're living in this awful, awful time for trans people. But then you have the self-appointed spokespeople ultimately declaring that this is fine. And in fact, when people do speak out against it, like, for example, ContraPoints, we might not agree on everything, but when she has a good take, she generally gets shit from it by her community. She's one of the only people who has spoke out against it. Everyone else has done roundabout defense. Maybe not outright condemning it, but, bring in their own personal experience of doxing and how evil all the TERFs are. But they're not really condemning what's happening. And again, their tactics are very, very clear. They don't actually condemn it because they agree with all of this. And they don't see how this looks. In fact, they don't really care how this looks, but they will still whine about how, society is becoming more and more transphobic. Well, I'm not going to say that society is transphobic because you're doxing J.K. Rowling and are trying to make her public enemy number one, but stuff like this certainly doesn't help when you hold such extreme beliefs as believing this person here is a woman, which try and explain to someone 10 years ago that you would have a rabid activist base with establishment links telling everyone that this is a woman. Imagine how that would sound. But that's what's happening. This is just an example of the extreme beliefs that these people hold. And yet, they also act in such an extreme way as well. They will always make apologetics for the way in which they act. We saw this when you had a trans activist attack a gender-critical woman at Speaker's Corner. We've had it when Julie Bindle was almost assaulted in, I believe it was in Edinburgh, it was quite a while ago. But you would always see the roundabout way of defending what had happened, where it's just the existence of a trans woman, or just the existence of a gender-critical woman there, it's a threat to our safety. And you will always see this with J.K. Rowling as well, like her blog piece that she wrote, which I thought was great. These people consider it, inflammatory. They see that as threatening just by her having an opinion. And again, just to kind of hammer this home, these same people believe that this is a woman. I have to keep on bringing up this image now whenever I talk about trans activism, because this is an extreme position to say that this is a woman. This is very 2 + 2 is 5. But again, just look at the way this comes across to wider society. And the fact that this all comes out of the way in which activists endorse certain policies or endorse certain behaviours. You will hear them whine about how, why are we always being expected to condemn stuff? Well, it's because it comes out of your activism. When you had things like Jessica Yaniv taking all those women to court for not waxing his balls, the whole reason why he was able to do that in the first place came about because of positions that activists push. That trans women's balls are women's balls. It's the same kind of thing when you demonize and turn someone into a monster and then they go and act like this, and then you kind of act in a roundabout way that this is somehow acceptable because, your level of morality only allows bad things to happen to your opponents who you've decided are inhuman. The trans community has a bad image out there. It's clear to everyone who isn't them. And when you start to defend actions like this, stuff that even the Prime Minister is condemning and speaking out against, please just understand that this makes you look bad, and it makes me look bad, and it makes all of us look awful. Because you have appointed yourselves as representatives of the community. Even Pink News, the way they've worded it, that's basically the activist line right there. Ignoring the fact that this is doxing or harassment, and instead just focusing on, well, it was, this trans rights protest. How dare one speak out against it? Thank you all for watching this video. If you like what I do, please like and subscribe. I'm just happy to announce that Seal of Approval is back at a regular time now. It's going to be back on Wednesdays at 8. This week I'm going to have Ariel Scarcella, Book Angel, and Mike Harlow, and we're going to discuss a number of topics. So please come and check that out. And also, here is Cami. A lot of you might not have seen all the updates I do of Cami on Twitter, so here she is. She's got big. But anyway, thanks everyone, and I'll see you all next time.